Hello, everybody. I'm Ron Waxman. We are on a special COVID-19 series on CRT. And with me today, Yuval Binur from Israel. And he's an entrepreneur, had a lot of to do with innovations and startup companies. And he's a big supporter of CRT and the ICI meeting. And Dr. Mark Turco, who is leading the innovation and technology at UPenn in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
And first of all, it's glad to hear that both of you in good health and feel well. And I'd like to borrow some of your time to discuss several topics. And both of you are involved in innovations. And I thought maybe we should look, what are the opportunities that this pandemic brings on the innovation side? And are there any opportunities? This impact current innovations? Maybe we'll start with you, Yuval.
I would say before we talk, thank you, Ron. Before we talk about the innovation, let's talk a little bit about, with your permission, about the lessons we learned from this epidemic. And I see two lessons to learn that we have, which raise problems that we have to resolve. One of them is the funding of innovation going forward. In the last few years, it was already difficult to fund device innovations. And the reason for it, because there was a disparity between the expectation of the money sources and the length of time it takes to bring product from concept into commercialization. There was a mismatch there. Now what happened with this pandemic, the stock markets and the public and private equity markets have been shaken up. People lost tons of money. As a result of it, they became more risk averse and not willing to take long-term risks. So we will be facing a highly difficult, very almost unusual difficult to get money for the early stage innovations. And without early stage innovations, we don't have late stage companies and we don't have altogether support to the advancement of cardiovascular. So this is one problem that we'll have to search very carefully how to solve, how to find alternative funding for these startups. Maybe in part to get government supports in various countries, maybe in part to build different structures of companies in order to enable the continuation of the innovation trend. But there's one more very important lesson out of the corona pandemic, and this is the following. We don't understand the impact of this virus on the cardiovascular system or on other systems in the body. So if we go to clinical studies, we'll have now to be very careful to select the people in the clinical studies that are non-infected at all, in order not to create bias wherever the virus had or will impact or change some of the outcomes of clinical studies. This will make clinical studies more expensive and more difficult to get patient recruitment. And if you add on top of it, the current fear of people to go to hospitals or altogether to participate in medical, let's call it, ventures as patients, these are the three major issues I think that we'll have with both the clinical community and the innovative community, the entrepreneurs, have to address as we're going forward.
Thank you. You covered a lot. I'll let Mark to respond, but what you see on the other hand, that FDA, for example, expedite the unprecedentedly approval of testing, of ventilators, of drugs. So maybe there is some silver lining there that if that can be done in the context of COVID-19, it maybe can be expanded. Again, I may be too optimistic and I want to hear what Mark thinks about it towards other devices in the cardiovascular arena. So let Mark, what is your response to Yuval comments and these opportunities?
Yeah, thanks, Ron, and thanks for having me. And this is a great topic and a good conversation. And thank you for everything that all the MedStar folks are doing on the front lines down there and helping in this pandemic. So, first off, I would respond to what Yuval has said. I do believe we need to find ways to continue to keep the research and development investment going. If we stop investing in R&D, either on the big company side, at the government level, or elsewhere, we're going to be in trouble here and not set us up for the next pandemic that may be coming down the pike. So it is key that we look at opportunities in how we can maintain and accelerate investments. That said, and as you pointed out, innovation's changed in a COVID-19 era and post. And now it's time to take the lessons learned from this COVID-19 period and how can we apply them moving forward. I think you mentioned from the standpoint of healthcare reform, the regulatory status of different technologies has changed. And that is good. That may also be not so good. I think if we look at some of the work that CDRH has done and our friend Jeff Shuren, he's done a fabulous job in moving technologies on the device side across the goal line. The problem is we still need to make sure that some of those technologies, especially if you look at some of the diagnostics where we're still having problems with sensitivity and specificity, that these technologies meet certain standards, that we are expecting. But it is nice to see the new guidance from the agency, and maybe we can take that moving forward to reform the system a bit more. We need to be much more effective in the way we innovate, though. And if you look back to the history of now what we've seen over the last couple months, the question in my mind is, are we innovating in the right areas? I think it's pretty clear that we should not be innovating in a field where we're delivering shiny new tools to the market or iterative products. We need to really make transformational changes, look at supply chains, look at things that basically can innovate in a way so that they basically are not quick to market, but that are sustainable over a longer period of time. And I think that change in how we approach and think about innovation is going to be a critical lesson learned as we move, out of this situation.
I agree, but I'd leave you both one example because this is not new. Let's take digital health, for example. We've been sitting on that. There is actually so much proliferation, but maybe, again, with the issue of social distancing, telehealth, I mean, there is much more opportunities now to go to that direction and to make things much, much better. I mean, that ever done before in this specific one, and that I think people will find the money. Maybe the agency would be much more willing to cut some more red tapes to get it forward. And getting forward is meaning, and I agree with you that we couldn't done what's done right now with the FDA overnight. This has been a process of 10 years. And if we move more from pre-marketing to post-marketing, so still making sure it's safe enough, but we want to look at the efficacy of everything and the utility that can be tested in a post-marketing era, we would be able to expedite. And that still would motivate the investors to put some seed money in those companies. It's going to be maybe harder to put the money on tricuspid insufficiency right now because the focus will be shift to specific areas that related to the time. I mean, we have to adapt. We cannot sit right now on technologies that would take 4, 6, 7 years to bring something to market. I understand it, but there are some, I mean, I think Yuval, you gave a very nice example about a ventilator company in Israel. So maybe you want to comment on those issues, including the digital health and some opportunities that we still have there.
Yes, thank you, Ron. I would say the following. First of all, it's not a matter of opportunity, it's a matter of a need. What the corona showed us, that there is a need for that. Why there is a need of that? Because we realize that the way we delivered healthcare to date is not any longer optimal in situations like the corona, and maybe in future situations altogether without huge pandemics like the corona, which means budgets to hospitals going forward will be limited. The reason for it is that there will be a total economic slowdown worldwide, in Israel, in the United States, everywhere. And by definition, also hospitals will suffer from this economic slowdown. It's only natural. Which means, again, you will not be able to expand hospitals at the pace that's required. Resources will be limited. The outcome of this in the way of delivering healthcare, which proved itself to be efficient or somewhat efficient during the corona crisis, is that patients which are not acute, that can be handled from home, will be handled from home. So I can envision a department run like yours, or maybe other departments that have, for example, 50 beds at the hospital and another 200 patients or 100 patients handled at home, either monitored post-procedure or addressed with other systems and ways being treated at home. That will be more cost effective and will release resources from the hospital for critical situations. This all must be done by digital. And we will have to change our attitude, very much like children learn to work with social media. We, the medical community, will have to learn how to work with it. So here we go to clinical education. I think the way we teach physicians have to change also as a result of it. Number one, we have to teach them rather more in doing emergency procedure, because if the next pandemic will come or in other natural disaster or maybe man-made disaster, you can never know, we'll have to pool resources to treat people in the ICU, in the emergency rooms, etc. Not everybody at the hospital is trained. I speak about nurses, about technicians, and of course about physicians. So here's a bit of a change to the educational system, as well as teaching them to use digital as much as possible. And for this, we have to build systems, and the money for this first need to come from hospitals and government support until the business models will be clarified and we can attract investors to make it bigger. I would say further, it's not a bad idea to consider a kind of a global warning system about medical situations. I think the World Health Organization has tremendous, United Nations one, has tremendous role in doing this. And maybe some UN money can come to help it. And that will be good for the US, for Israel, for developing countries and emerging third world countries. So digital is coming. We cannot avoid it. We have to learn how to adapt to it. And as important, to give the patients the confidence that you don't need to come to my office. You can see me on video and I can address your problems as good. It's a matter of gaining confidence that a little bit was lost, maybe because of political issues more than clinical issues during this pandemic. But that's the new way how healthcare will be delivered, in my view. And we have to prepare for it and to fund it and to build it and to really give it a lot of thoughts. So, you know, in conferences, and maybe there'll be no more conferences, maybe there'll be all Zoom conferences going forward, or whatever, I don't know. But definitely more attention have to be given to this digital world that is going to change how we deliver healthcare in the future.
Thank you. Mark, maybe you can expand on how telehealth work in your institution, and also how do you deal with bringing back the confidence of patients to come to have procedures? Because we all have seen the decline in patients who are coming for STEMI and they just don't like to come to procedures. So how do you handle that? What is the solutions in Penn?
Yeah, so let me maybe start with the former. So when we talk about telehealth coming out of this pandemic, I mean, that is clearly the biggest plus for what has been going on, and sense of optimism is we have now really pushed along telemedicine, which kind of percolated out there for a number of years. And the digital world is now basically within the healthcare system, and it's helping with the delivery of healthcare and the systems of care. I still think that obviously, even though we're going to be able to fall back on telemedicine, that you're going to have the need, physicians and patients are going to have the need to interact in a physical presence, especially the more complex patients. Physicians are still going to demand it and want to see their physicians face to face, et cetera. So great advances in telemedicine, and certainly at Penn with the telemedicine programs that we have, it has been tremendous. I've sat in on a couple of the patient visits, and it's really pretty seamless given the digital technologies that we have to allow these telemedicine visits to progress. So they're helping us with the systems of care, and certainly this pandemic has accelerated our change in habits as physicians, moving forward. I think we still, again, have work to do with regards to where we need to take ultimately our digital technologies and how can we use them to help us diagnose? How can we basically set up, if we think about tracing patients now, what can we do in a post-pandemic era around traceability using digital technologies and digital advances, which are going to be critical, as we move forward. So I think, great strides, a great push from this pandemic to move the digital era forward that was kind of percolating out there. We still have work to do, though, moving forward as we, come out of this pandemic.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll give you maybe two examples. We are dealing with two companies right now. One is Avail, the other one is Carl Stores. It's actually installing system in our cath lab, but also it's a robotic. You can take it from room to room. You can actually go to the even isolated room, put the robotic there, you see the patients, you can zoom, you can see the EKG, you can see the echo, you can see almost everything. And this is two private companies that actually trying to sell those to the hospitals, also to replace all the proctoring, also to guide you during procedures. And I have to say, the quality is amazing. I mean, it's we've been using it just as a test case, and from remote, you have full control. You can interact as a proctor with the operator. You see direct connection to your echo, to the fluoro. So that's definitely making a difference. The other comment that I said, again, my own experience, you start to get to the elderly, like the 85, and to get them into the login and using the healthcare, boy, I mean, it take you an hour and a half just to get them on it. So it's not that simple for everyone of the elder population to get into this technology barrier. So again, there is much more room to develop that. And one concern that, and again, there is maybe we cannot do much about it, but in my view, the key issue is to get confident and bring the patients back to the hospital to have procedures. And right now they have a lot of fear, and maybe the telehealth actually teach them, hey, I don't need to come to the hospital anymore. I don't need to come anymore to the office of my doctor. I can get everything once I learn how to do it. So that again will pose a big problem for hospitals, because if they're not going to renew their elective procedures, they're not going to be able to survive. And we already have big layoff in some institutions, even in our area in Washington, not at MedStar, but neighboring institution laid off 400, one, the other one 1,000. I mean, they claim it's not physicians and nurses by now. I understand it, but it's clearly that if we're not going to renew the elective procedure, it's going to come also on the healthcare providers. So we do have to look at every change. There may be some consequences, and we have to be prepared to those consequences. So,
Ron, I think the one area that it's not only on the elective side, one area, and we've seen this in the field of cardiac medicine, is the delayed presentation for STEMI patients coming to, the emergency room. Are patients going to basically stay at home with their symptoms now and think they can use telemedicine and telehealth and then present late into the course of their disease? And then we're starting to see a much higher prevalence of post-myocardial infarction complications, mechanical complications, et cetera. And so, as you say, I think, with every great advance, we need to make sure that patients understand this is all we understand in the community that we live in, the digital technologies well, and when to use telemedicine, when not. But we have to make sure that's communicated to the public so that they understand how to interact well with the healthcare system.
If I can add to this, Ron, one word, I
Yes.
would like to say the following. This telemedicine, the way you describe it, is not kind of letting the patient stay home and watching videos, movies. They are monitored on day in, day out, and we have to build the monitoring system, whether nurse watching it in a central or whatever other system. So they are not kind of say, hey, take your video and don't worry. That's not the case. But I want to address also one other question that you, Ron, asked before, and this is where innovation should go forward. And the example that I have written about, and you mentioned it, is about improvising a ventilator when there was a tremendous shortage globally and of course in Israel. It's a good example. The question is, what if you look now at what happened during the pandemic in most of the hospitals globally, by the way, not only in the United States, not only in Israel, of course, you see that some very basic things are missing. You look on, first of all, on the protective systems. Look how physicians are dressed. They're inefficient. That's like aliens from outer space. So it's not a bad idea for somebody, instead of developing a third version of MitraClip, to go to think about a better protective system for the physician. Further, in the hospitals, I think from now on, we'll have to put by far more attention into preventing infections by maybe nominating officers, putting a lot of attention to that, and delivering it to the patients, telling the patients. And this is the last point in your question, Ron, that I want to address. Honest information, open information, real information to the patients from the physicians will gain the confidence. In fake information that surfaced on the net all the time, from injecting detergent into the body and God knows other stupid things, including some criminals that played and tried to take advantage through all this, that have to be prevented. And the only way to prevent it is people like us, like you, Ron, like other heads of hospitals, should come out to the public, not only to us, the physicians and the entrepreneurs, to the publics, and deliver to them honest information. We have to find the ways and the platforms how to do it. It's not 100% clear to me, but I noticed that in this pandemic, that there were more political activities around this to the public rather than clinical information, honest clinical information. This will have to find a way how to reverse it if you want to gain the confidence of the patients into the physician and into the medical system.
I agree.
Ron,
We have to leave the politics out of this. Mark?
Absolutely.
no, we spent a lot of time, and I think I want to make sure we make this point. We spent a lot of time now talking about big tech. And there's no doubt, without all of the telemedicine startups that are out there, without Zoom, without the Amazons and Googles of the world, we would not be able to communicate the way we're communicating today and in this era. But I think we have to keep in mind now that we need to find a way to connect big tech with the biomedical technologies, because we need vaccines, we need drugs, we need other technologies beyond just the big tech side of things to basically help prepare us as we move into the future. And that's an important lesson. And that gets back to where I started on the R&D side. How come we have not been preparing our supply chains for some of the needs that we need? It's not just big tech. It's not just digital technologies. It's that overlay of biomedical technologies with the big data and technology side of the field that we're in.
Yeah, and we'll need to learn how to deliver healthcare. This is also about innovation. We have to innovate ourselves and adapt to this new scenario, because it's not going to leave us. I mean, we all know, I mean, we're going to have maybe low levels of COVID-19. We're going to have maybe surges, but we have to, I mean, the world is changing. This is like after September 11, we had TSA for life. I think here we're going to have something for life to the extent that we'll have to deal with it. So the solution should come. And that's why I think we need the innovation. So it's bringing me to the last topic. And I think Yuval mentioned it, but it's nice to say globalization, globalization, everybody agree with it. But what does that mean? I mean, how do you get the globalization to work together to advance the innovation? If you can really give me like the recipe for that, because the word itself, we all in agreement, but how do we do that, Yuval?
Here you touch about, I would say, more of a personal relations. If you look on our community, say the interventional cardiologist, if you look on other communities, ophthalmology, neurology, it's not infinite number of people. We all know, we know the key opinion leaders, we see them, we talk to them, etc. We have to create the platforms that really talk constantly, not only coming to conferences and giving them a kind of niche corner to talk about what they do. And through these platforms, if we keep talking and building these personal relations, I think it works out. And the main issue is I would say we have 4 big continents that we have to worry about. The United States, number 1, the EU or Europe at large, not only EU, number 2. We have China, which is extremely important with 1.4 billion people, with physicians that are really starting to be more and more open for discussions, for exchanging information, for sharing. And of course, there's always South America and Africa. They're all affecting each other. A pandemic in Africa will affect us, no question, if there will be another one. And it's all keep building the personal relations, whether through meetings, through invitations, through talking, but creating a platform. I know we're all busy, we have no time for many things, but we have to find this opportunity how to do it. And here I would say the entrepreneurs and the venture people can help a lot. Why? Because there's, maybe at one time we can also convince the regulators all over the world about homologization of the studies. So study that done in the United States will be good enough for China. We don't need to repeat it, and so on and so on. So maybe through us doing some studies globally, not only in the US, in accepting more data from all over the world for our studies of the new product, that will create a bridge, because then you create advisory boards and PIs in various countries. That's one step to how to do it. And we are trying to do it very hard and pretty successful so far, I have to say, mostly with China, Israel, and the United States, but also in other areas. And also on clinical ideas, on clinical dilemmas, creating a forums that we can talk together and build friendship. At the moment we are friends, globalization will come by itself.
You're not talking about IP, right? I mean, the IP still has to be.
No, IP is IP. You take IP and you protect yourself worldwide. That's okay. I mean, no physician is interested to take away IP. That's not the issue here.
Mark, your final word.
Yeah, no, thanks, Ron. And this is an interesting topic because, and I go back and forth on it, and I think all of us, as we listen to the news and listen to politicians, and I agree, we're not going to get into politics here, but we have to be careful that we maintain globalization. I think globalization in healthcare is critically important for a lot of the reasons that Yuval has laid out. We need to be able to find global solutions to problems like this and find ways to run global clinical trials that basically incorporate all of the diverse populations of the world. I worry that the physical distance that we're used to now may impact innovation and globalization a bit, and some of the politics may ultimately impact globalization, which I think would be not so good for where we need to move forward in healthcare. One of the areas that, and we've talked about a lot of positives here, one of the other positive areas that I've seen on my front, especially at the University of Pennsylvania, is the opportunity to basically develop out private-public partnerships. That has been unique during this time era where we're working with companies like Abbott Diagnostic on different diagnostics and looking at longitudinal patient analyses and trying to improve on sensitivity specificities, working with different ventilatory companies to help in the needs around the ventilatory space, and then certainly on the biomedical side, biotech side, in vaccine development and other immunotherapies and immunology areas. And I want to make sure that we maintain globalization. It's going to be critically important moving forward. So I hope that the physical distance does not move us away from the opportunity to continue to leverage all of the expertise around the world.
Ron, if you'll give me one more word, I want to finalize my view in saying the following. Viruses do not recognize any geographical borders. They don't recognize trade walls, trade barriers. They go all over the world. And we have to follow them the way they go.
Well, thank you both on the contribution to this session. I think it's nice to see that both of you are optimistic. We have to maintain like that. In my view, there are a lot of opportunities for innovation, and I think we learned a lot through the current crisis. We definitely recognize globalization. I think Zoom has helped us actually to be more connected than before. We can do a lot. I do still hope that there will be time for meetings like ICI and CRT and TCT and PCR. Maybe we'll have to skip a year, but there is still something which is important, this person-to-person communication. So I'd like to again thank you. I hope to see you in person soon. That would be a good sign. And hear about your contribution to innovations in this healthcare era. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ron. Take care. Stay well.